Humanity has colonized the 4 terrestrial planets and is colonizing the asteroid belt. Most of the series takes place on a futuristic Ceres, which is being settled and industrialized. Meteoroids are asteroid-based meat growths often tended to by farmers within the solar system's main belt. Small layers of flesh are grown in a garden-like fashion over the surface of an asteroid or planetesimal. They form differentiated layers of neoplasm-derived muscle-like tissue that are able to be systematically harvested. Because they consume metal, meat miners must wear plastic suits and use living or plastic-coated spacecraft to land. Meteoroids can also be cooked by surrounding the object in a swarm of mirrors and flying over its surface with a microwave gun. Larger, more massive meat planets can be grown at locations outside the solar frost line, such as in the Trojan and Greek asteroid camps. A hard crust of space ice forms an external ice shell that protects the mass from impacts. The occasional flesh saxum protrudes up into the ice shell, delivering waste onto the surface. Accumulated waste is regularly gathered for use as fertilizer in greenhouse space stations. The waste delivered by the saxums is warm, with the local skin melting the ice and allowing water to trickle downwards towards the meaty mantle, having been absorbed into special pores. The meat planet's size, when combined with its metabolic activity, creates a worldwide temperature gradient, dividing the mantle, composed of cortex tissue, into 3 main layers: the meat locker layer, the living layer, and the cooking layer. Each layer contains its own intricacies, often forming minor substrata at various depths within. The meat locker layer is cold, consisting of frozen flesh that acts as an insulator against the icy crust. This non-living subsurface meat can be extracted, packaged, and exported by meat miners. Such workers often live in habitats located in small ice caves, with stations being anchored to the walls of the cavities. As an explorer excavates deeper into the meat planet, the heat generated by the metabolic tissue generally increases. The core is too hot to keep the meat alive, and the ice shell is so cold that it kills most of the immediate meat. Thus, there is logically a depth at which the temperature is perfect for life to thrive. This is the living layer, where blankets of meat are stacked atop one another, sharing nutrients in a beautiful symbiosis of consumption. The fleshy substrate is typically left to grow, festering as it expands. Chambers of waste gas often form within the living layer, inevitably rupturing in catastrophic collapses known as meat quakes. Meat planets are much more vascularized than meteoroids. Occasionally, mutations within the meat bed will occur, and strange regional differences may develop. Documented anomalies include rogue, tooth-like fangs, measuring up to 5 feet in length, boulder-sized ingots of struvite, the material that makes up kidney stones, reinforced lung-like chambers, in which stringy networks of flesh are able to grow, or even skeleton-like megastructures strong enough to damage intruding machinery. Unique patches of faster-growing tissue may occasionally rise, often outcompeting the local tissue in which they grow. The flesh of these tumors must be sampled to ensure they are fit for human consumption, as it is unknown if meat planet tissue can become parasitic to baseline animals. As one ventures deeper, the temperature increases to a point that living cells can no longer tolerate. Meat cells will not directly colonize this area. Rather, the mitosis of cells within the living layer slowly forces some tissue downwards towards the scalding hot lower mantle. The heat generated by the weight and the metabolic activity of the expanding meat bed above begins to pressure cook the meat, creating fleshy layers of perfectly cooked protein cuisine. This is the cooking layer, which contains a plethora of meaty tissues ranging from rare to medium to well done. It is possible to remove this cooked flesh via lower mantle meat mining, a process involving the boring of a deep hole into the meat planet and the construction of a temporary camp, complete with multiple elevators and an automated cooling system that pumps down melted ice from the crust. As time progresses, meat within the cooking layer will transition from the quality of fine dining to the quality of overcooked, partially liquefied goo, so it is important for meat miners to actively harvest tissue from the top and middle of the cooking layer as it is forced downward and heated. The cooling effect necessary to keep such personnel alive in the lower mantle meat mining operations does occasionally create the perfect environment for cells from the living layer to colonize the immediate area, and thus The operating period of these deep meat mines is constrained not only by the duration of time in which the tissue is perfectly cooked, but also by the interval it takes for living meat to start growing around the lower mantle mineshaft. This often contributes to the temporary nature of such encampments. There is, of course, still a physical limit to the extent to which humans can survive within the depths of the meat planet. Furthermore, there is also a practical limit to the amount of resources that conglomerate corporations are willing to spend on funding deep mantle mining operations. However, some exploration projects have voyaged deeper into the warm innards of such celestial bodies, expeditions which have yielded fascinating results. Meat planets have dynamic, chemically active cores. The outer core consists of mildly toxic cauterized flesh. Tissue below the cooking layer of the mantle slowly loses structural integrity as the depth increases, eventually forming a viscous, semi-fluid substance known as carnoplasm, often referred to as slag or cellular slop by meat miners. Meat planet slag resembles a slurry of molten flesh, containing densely packed bits of deceased tissue. The pressure and heat at these depths is often enough to alter the chemistry of the knot meat by compacting the chunks together as it churns within the outer core's convection currents. While this process further coagulates the cellular slop, it also has the side effect of creating a substance that experienced lower mantle miners know by the name of lethal lymph, a combination of the words lethal and lymph, with the latter referring to bodily liquids. This fluid is much more runny than carnoplasm, and thus rises upwards, as its squeezed-out origin renders it less dense than its surroundings. This causes a churning motion within the thick slag, causing bubbles to rise upwards to the lower mantle. Because the lower mantle takes the form of a single, spherical manifold of cooked meat, pressurized lethal lymph pools accumulate just underneath the mantle core boundary, similar to bubbles of air trapped underneath a layer of ice. However, cooked meat is semi-permeable, so lethal lymph slowly diffuses upwards. In small amounts, the liquid is completely safe. The problem arises whenever a particular patch of lower mantle meat becomes overcooked, trapping the lethal lymph plumes just below the surface of the cooking layer. Due to the immense force exerted on them by the matter above, these pockets of liquid create a high-pressure environment. If left alone, such a chamber would eventually shrink as the lethal lymph diffuses. However, as previously discussed, employees of meat mining companies often carry out drilling operations as to reach delectably cooked blankets of meat found at specific depths within the lower mantle. The outer core's constituent slag is very compacted, but both lethal lymph and regular cooked flesh are around the same density, hence why they are able to exist at the same depths. This unfortunate fact renders lethal lymph pools very hard to detect via sonic impact machines and seismographic readouts, meaning that meat miners have almost no warning whenever they are about to breach a bubble while drilling or excavating. While more experienced personnel are able to rely upon pure intuition to guide their hands while carving slices of meat from the lower cooking layer, newer recruits are not so lucky. About 1 out of every 18 newly transferred meat miners dies due to lethal lymph explosions, being almost instantly killed from the force of impact with the liquid after erroneously cutting the wrong piece of meat, puncturing a fluid-filled plume chamber. Lethal lymph typically erupts with the power of an industrial water jet cutter, slicing through any victims within the immediate vicinity. While rare, these pockets sometimes contain enough pressurized liquid to flood entire tunnels carved out by meat miners, occasionally trapping crew members within the meat-walled corridors. Assuming they survive the brunt of the rupturing event, such stranded persons can typically be rescued by specially trained extraction teams, though not everyone is so lucky. Due to the hazards posed by venturing into the carnoplasm seas of the outer core, little is known about what occurs at the very center of a meat planet. It is suspected that lurking deeper still, there lies a nigh perfectly rounded inner core composed of kerogen, the chemical precursor to fossil fuels. While the radius of any given outer core instance is able to be calculated, while cooked meat and lethal lymph are the same density, it is still possible to differentiate between cooked meat and slag. The true scale and volume ratio of the inner kerogen core is unknown. Thus, due to the speculative nature of such predictions, the exact numbers are highly debated by astrogeocarnologists, scientists who study meat rocks in space. Thank you for visiting these meat planets with me. I hope to see you soon, and remember, if you have any questions or comments, Make sure to post them in the section below.